We're confusing damage, biological damage, with aging. Health is an innate thing that is built within us. It is a God-given quality to being alive. And so, sure, we lose capacity. We lose stem cells as we get older. We lose peptide signaling. This is a part of the process of aging, but we actually don't know what is causing aging. All the damages that happen in the body, we have the capacity to repair. So the question is why aren't we able to keep up with the damage? Why does damage inevitably override the amount of repair that can take place? Right? And sure, we can play catch up. So we can quote anti-age by cleaning up some of the damage by changing our lifestyle, eating better foods, doing things like fasting and getting good sleep and exercise and good relationships. But the question is why is it like a one directional thing on the broad scale, right? Why can't we keep up? We don't know.
In today's busy world, how can we find the inspiration, knowledge, and energy to live a healthy and empowered life? If we balance and harmonize our mind, exercise our body, live according to the laws of nature, and connect to spirit, can we find a way to heal, become our authentic self, and live our purpose with love? I am your hostess, Amy Fournier, and welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite. Hey, cutting in here for a moment to share with you, I've got my buddy Ross Newkirk here from Conscious Technologies. And everybody's looking to raise their vibration. How can I just have better mojo, be in more harmony, more flow? I love that Ross has created so many products that I use personally to help me raise my vibration and even harmonize my vibration. So Ross, the Core Harmonizer is one of the key technological products that you guys have designed to help us raise our vibration. Can you just tell us what makes it unique? How, in fact, does it raise our vibration so effectively?
Well, it uses frequencies of light and music and sacred nested geometries to create a coherent field. And when someone's in that field or environment, you're able to access higher levels of awareness and access information that when you are disconnected, you don't have access to. So as we raise our frequency and vibration, we're actually able to access a new toolbox, if you will, that has the tools to help us navigate life more easily, such as answers to so-called problems that we may have. You can actually find those answers when you enter into higher levels of awareness and consciousness, because that's where the solutions to these so-called problems exist. So it's a wonderful piece of technology to help people raise their vibration.
And it's so easy because, guys, all you have to do is plug it in. They do all the hard work for you. They put it together and they send it to your house. You plug it in. I got mine playing right now. I use it 24/7. I love it. My pets love it. The birds outside love it. My plants love it. Ross, how can they find a Core Harmonizer of their own and get a special discount?
Yeah, they can actually go to your website, amyfournier.com, and just enter FitAmyTV10 to get 10% off.
How does Paleo Valley and Wild Pastures, your companies, how do they basically transform the meat industry? How are they part of the solution?
Yeah, so our beef sticks are all sourced from American regenerative farms. 70 to 80% of the grass-fed beef in America today is imported from other countries. And so I think what we're doing when we support that is we're undermining our ability to create a sustainable food source and rehabilitate our soil here in America. It's part of the solution because we work with these small-scale family farmers and we create that demand. We connect them to the conscious consumers like your listeners. At every stage of the process in all of our products, we're considering agriculture. We are understanding that link between human and environmental health. And so we're just creating products that help people support that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for making foods that taste good, are super healthy, are consciously produced, and so convenient. I mean, everybody right there. What else do you need to know other than, you got a coupon code Amy Fournier 10. That's all caps, AMYFOURNIER 10. If you forget, it's on my website, recommended products. I really hope you try Paleo Valley. You won't regret it. Now let's get back to the show. Welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. This show is about helping you to be healthy and fit in mind, body, and spirit, as well as harmonizing your masculine and feminine energy, tapping into your intuition, your true source of power, and awakening your authentic self. My friends, how you live now will determine how you live later. It doesn't matter what your chronological age is. This is a true fact. And trust me, when you get older, you're going to wish you lived better when you were younger. I know even me now, I'm starting to feel the aches and pains of when I was an athlete, all those concussions, all those collisions, all those tweaks of my back and my hip and my left ankle and this and that. So please prioritize your health and wellness, your self-care now. You deserve it. It's important, and you will be glad you did when you get older. Because life is about getting better as we get older, isn't it? This is what we all want. And I don't know about you, but I'm not against aging because it beats the alternative, right? But we all want to age well. We want to age gracefully. We want to maintain our function, our facilities, our independence, and our quality of life. That's why I'm thrilled to share with you today's guest, Jason Prall. He's a repeat guest. He was on the show on episode 180, where we talk about orienting yourself towards ease and unlocking your true power by tapping into and expressing your feminine. You want to check out that episode with Jason because this guy is brilliant. He's got so much to offer, which is why I had him on twice. And I'll share with you, if you hadn't heard the episode, that we were actually supposed to talk about what we're talking about today on that episode. But the Great Spirit just took it a different direction, and we talked about all those amazing, wonderful things. So Jason gracefully agreed to come back on the show today, where we're going to talk about health span versus lifespan and about getting better as we get older and learning from what healthy older people do and what the cultures do and how we can apply it to our lives so we can benefit from it today. So in this episode, we talk about chronological versus biological age, how aging is biosymbolic and illness is biosymbolic for that matter. The three main things that Jason discovered in his research on older cultures and healthy cultures and what they do to be that way. I asked Jason if there's a difference for aging when it comes to men and women. The top three things that we can do to age gracefully ourselves. The famous blue zones. Hormetic stress. How aging is a perception problem. How we can become the wise elder. The importance of being mindful of what you're actually living for and how to live with purpose. The number one factor when it comes to longevity and quality of life as you get older. The three common factors that healthy older cultures have in common and what we can learn from them. And lastly, the importance of embracing discomfort in our everyday lives. This is such an important, fascinating, empowering episode. I'm thrilled to share it with you. And if you're interested in this type of topic, you definitely want to check out my episode with Dr. Mario Martinez, who's a pioneer when it comes to aging. We talk about cultural portals and the whole mindset thing and what healthy centenarians do. That's episode 80. And episode 79 with Wisdom Keeper, True Wise Elder, Bearheart, and the Medicine of Bearheart, episode 79. And don't forget episode 180, Jason's first appearance, where you can get a lot more of his backstory, and we talk about the divine feminine in that one too. So I hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to support me, the best way to do so, leave a review, subscribe. You can share the show and even check out all my favorite products with my coupon codes because they help you, they help me, and they help support these amazing vendors, that people that are producing quality products and want to help make the world a better place. So let's now join Jason Prall. Welcome back to the show, everybody, and welcome back, Jason.
Oh, thanks for having me, Amy. Good to see you again.
Wow. Well, hopefully everybody already heard your first appearance on the show, where we just did a complete unexpected pivot and talked about so many fascinating things. And I loved it so much. I really that'll be in the show notes for everybody, the show number, but I hope they check that out because you really give us an insight as to the depth of your experience and your knowledge. And I love, of course, my favorite topic, talking about the divine polarities. And it's so beautiful to hear a strong masculine man talk about the feminine essence in himself and how he's living it every day and what that looks like. And you are just such a great example. So I'm super grateful for that. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks. It's definitely a work in progress. So appreciate you, the flattery.
Glad you're human. It's never over, right? And then it's like the more you learn, the more you're like, oh God, there's just the beginning. But that's what makes it interesting, right?
That's right.
So wonderful. So, all right, let's get into longevity today, which is really well, it was the major pivot in your life, right? You were an engineer. We went into it just a teeny bit in the last episode, but you had a major pivot studying longevity. So why don't you give us the synopsis of what happened there and what got you into studying longevity and exactly what you did to learn all that you've learned about healthy older humans.
Yeah, well, it started with my own health issues that cropped up. Honestly, at 13 is when I first noticed them, and they started with chronic joint pain, and then in my early 20s, I suffered from a chronic skin condition, and that the knee pain and the joint pain lasted decades, right? And so it's still sort of a mystery to me as to the origins of that. So, but I was unable to find any help, couldn't figure out what was going on, and since then, still have yet to find any true answers around the sort of causal nature to that, right? So, which is the interesting aspect to health. I think a lot of us may be dealing with some kind of mental, emotional, or physical pains or ailments, and we don't really ever get to the origin, perhaps, right? Which doesn't mean that it can't get resolved. It just means there's still confusion around what is really the origin of it. So that's certainly the case for me. And through that process of my own sort of health issues that I was dealing with was a discovery about what health is, where it comes from, all the sort of misgivings that I had around the medical industry and what it's really designed to do and what it's good at and all that, and really a more personal sort of discovery process of like taking back my own power, really owning it, owning the responsibility, owning all the pains and all the ailments as mine. Right. And so there's a sort of reclamation process that happened. And through that led me to becoming a sort of health practitioner, sort of unnamed, right? I practiced kind of integrative functional medicine. I was non-licensed, but I still ran a lot of the organic acids tests and the gut tests and food sensitivity tests and all the tests that we can run in basically every orifice of the body, right? And so as I sort of got better and better at that and seeing more and more clients, I started to recognize the patterns, right? And this is what's interesting in the health world is we have so much knowledge at our fingertips, right? Between Google Scholar and the NIH and all the public databases of health information that we can find. And of course, we have bloggers and opinion people and all this stuff, right? Podcasts. And it seems like you can become an expert on health by just reading the data and the literature and learning more and more and being a good student. And to some degree, that's true. But when you're facing somebody that has a chronic health issue and they're coming to you for the answer, that is a different story, right? And so that's what really put me to the test. And it showed me what I was good at and what I had a grasp on and what I didn't know and didn't know how to even resolve, right? And so we have our own personal experience that we can rely on. But once you start working with other people, it's a different ballgame, right? And so it was that process that sort of allowed me to cut my teeth is as a practitioner, right? And to think like a practitioner, and then to approach these problems that I was coming up against that I didn't know how to solve as a student, right? As a sort of humble student in that regard. And so nevertheless, through the years of working as a practitioner, I started seeing a lot of the same issues, right? So whether cancer walked through the door or autoimmune conditions walked through the door or unnamed syndromes or hormonal imbalances or whatever the sort of primary sort of diagnosable condition came through, I recognized that there was a fundamental misunderstanding about health. There's a fundamental misunderstanding about the lifestyle implications and how to induce health, so to speak. And so that was the process of me sort of diving into the longevity space, right? It was only after sort of seeing these repeated patterns of we just forgot how to live. We really have forgotten how to live. And most of us have never been taught. We've never been modeled what healthy living looks and sounds like and feels like and whatnot. So that was really kind of this repetitive nature of me teaching about what to do, no matter what the condition was. What are the fundamentals? What are the basics that one needs to implement in order to give themselves a chance to recover from whatever condition they were dealing with?
Excellent. Okay, so then how did it get into the longevity space in particular?
Yeah, so
lifespan.
One of the things I've noticed, right, in the health industry over the past, let's say, decade or more, is this very weird mentality about longevity, right?
Yep.
Simultaneously, what we're seeing right now is we're actually seeing that kids are predicted to live shorter lives than their parents. So we're actually seeing the life expectancy go down, right? Not only is the life expectancy going down in the US and in some Western countries, but we're also seeing chronic conditions rise. Right, people are
at a
getting
younger
sick.
age,
Exactly.
like
People are getting
diabetes
sicker,
when they're
younger.
5 and stuff crazy.
That's right. Things that we weren't seeing until older age are now happening in middle age. Things that we weren't seeing, that we're only seeing in adults, are now happening in children. So things are getting worse, not better. And yet simultaneously, we're seeing the regenerative medicine movement is off the charts now, right? We've got stem cells and biologics of all kinds that are being used, right? Peptides are now pretty popular. We've got really cool things happening. People are talking about kind of these nanobots and all kinds of stuff going on. And that's all well and good. And then I hear also in this sort of current health craze is, I'm going to live to 200 and aging is a disease and we don't need to die. Right. And like, these are very mixed messages, right? So we have like all this stuff going on, right? This idea of I can live a long time. And then also there's these things out there that can help us. And also we're sicker than ever and we're dying shorter, or we're living shorter lives. And so it's a very bizarre reality in the Western world. And so I thought, okay, well, that being that, let's go around the world and look at what people are doing and what they have been doing to live long lives, right? And of course, there's the Blue Zones work that probably many of your listeners are familiar with. And if you're not, it's these technically five, but really 4 regions around the world that have been identified as Blue Zones by demographer Michel Poulin and National Geographic. And these are statistical outlying areas. In other words, there's these specific areas where people are living to 100 at a statistically significant rate. So again, this is all based on data. And Michel Poulin's the one who's done a lot of the legwork in there, in that you got to go to these regions, right? Sardinia being one of them. And then you have to look at birth records. So you have to actually verify it scientifically, right? So you can't just take people's word for it, because people that are in that age range, there's a lot of just, throwing around of numbers and forgetting about when somebody was actually born because record keeping was poor. So there's a very interesting window, this record keeping being not particularly good, but yet you got to have some records. And so he did a lot of that work.
I do that now.
Right.
I'm already doing that. It's like, wait, what year was that?
Yeah, totally. And so, so he's done that and identified these specific regions: Sardinia, next to Italy, Ikaria, which is an island in Greece, Okinawa, right next to Japan, and then the Guanacaste region of Costa Rica. Now, people like to throw in Loma Linda into this sort of Blue Zone work too, and it was more of like a journalistic addition to include the United States, because the readers would be more inclined to get involved with the work if there was a place in the United States. But really, Loma Linda is not a Blue Zone. At best, it might be what we call the gray zone, according to Michel Poulin, which is that there's a certain demographic of people in that region, namely the Seventh-day Adventists, who practice a particular lifestyle that allows them to live longer than their counterparts. But other people in Loma Linda that are not Seventh-day Adventists are not living a long time.
Well,
right?
there you go. Just curious, where in the country is that located? Just curious.
Yeah, it's in California. It's next to me. It's in kind of the armpit of California. It's in like a really not a particularly great area. And you drive through, you get off the highway, or you're driving on the highway, and you see all the fast food signs. It looks like a pretty standard rural American place, right? With all kinds of unhealthy options. And so It's not the region. It's nothing about Loma Linda per se. I mean, sure, they have the Loma Linda University, which does a lot of work on on longevity and health, and there's some good things happening there, no question. But it's really the community of Seventh-day Adventists that are cultivating this lifestyle of health and longevity.
Well, that just makes the point stronger then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so and the brilliant work about the Blue Zones work that I love is that it is different parts of the world. So we can't say it's genetics, right? These are totally different genetics. They're even vastly different geographical sort of environments, right? We've got a lowland island in Okinawa, right? We've got this sort of like deserty type of inland environment in Guanacaste in Costa Rica. Sardinia, and the specific places in Sardinia are in the mountains. So it's this kind of cooler mountainous region. And so they eat different foods, they live different lives, but they had some commonalities about the way they lived. But the important thing that I wanted to bring attention to was not to sort of duplicate the Blue Zone work, because they did some good work, but I wanted to take a more holistic look from a health practitioner perspective. In other words, not what are they all doing? In other words, they're all eating beans and they're all doing, this and that. Like, it goes way, way beyond that, right? I wanted to go back in order to create a 100-year-old, a centenarian. We got to look at what was life like when they were born. What was life like when they were 5? What was life like before there? What were their parents doing, right? And so that's where you start to really glean a lot of cool information, right? And in Ikaria, Greece, for example, in the rural villages where these people lived, they didn't have electricity until about 1960.
Wow.
So that means a centenarian who's 100 years old in 2000 was going to be 60 years old before they experienced any electricity. Well, let's say they were a centenarian in 2010, right? More closely to when we studied them. That would mean they lived 50 years of their life without electricity, right? So imagine what that's like. Imagine you're camping for the first 50 years of your life.
Yeah, hard to even imagine, really.
Right. That means you don't have refrigeration. That means you're not driving automobiles any realistic ways.
Cooking.
Televisions, all the modern electronics, right?
Heat,
like
air conditioning,
Exactly. So you're living in a totally different way. So because of that one piece of information that I just gave you, if you just sit with it long enough and imagine what life is like, then every part of your reality will shift, right? The drinking water, of course, how food is processed, right? The where you're getting food from, all of that is going to change, right? So in other words, we actually can't, to some degree, we can't take too much comparison with these Blue Zone type places, because the United States, the modern world, will never go back to a Blue Zone like environment. We might pull some things, and I hope we do, but that's what's important to look at, is what does that tell us about what is driving health, right? So it's not about, as a 95-year-old, what are they eating that I should be concerned about, and then therefore I'm going to eat that, right? Like, a lot of people think like that. What are they doing for exercise? They don't do breath work. They don't do yoga. They don't do qigong. They don't do meditation. They don't do any of these things that are becoming popular here in the West. Why? Because they don't need to. Their whole life is like a meditation, right? They get up with the sun. They're moving with the calendar. They're moving with the solar cycle. Every day they operate with the sun, right? Every season they're eating with what the season is going to provide. Every year of their life, they're eating food that is grown locally, because there is no other way, right? This is a different reality. And so to some degree, we can look at that and go, oh my gosh, that sounds impossible. I'll never be able to be, make it to 100, right? Because I can't live like that. However, we can pull from that, right? And we can say, okay, we live in a modern world. We are actually faced with more challenges in many ways than they are. When I walk into a grocery store, I have to consciously make a choice not to buy that really tasty thing that is, packaged in such a way and on the shelf in just the right height to grab my attention, that has a sale price on it, right? Like, we have marketing pulling us into these unhealthy choices. So I have to actively avoid all of that, right? And in many places of the country, we of course don't even have a choice, because our environment's set up such that we are only given these sort of unhealthy type of options. So we do the best we can with what we got, right? So we're facing different challenges in our modern world. And so that's what's important to recognize. So yes, let's take some information from the Blue Zone work. And yes, let's look at our modern world and say, what are we doing wrong, right? Because when I'm watching TV late at night, when I have computers in my face all day and I don't get outside in the natural light, that is signaling to my biology something a little bit unnatural. My biology is not quite sure what to do with that information, because we have been on this planet as humans for thousands of years with the same signal being the sun, the moon, the stars, fire, used in the sort of same ways. Right now we got all this new lighting environment that's changing our biology. It's changing how our brain operates. It's changing how our hormones secrete. It's changing all of the clock genes that are in every cell of my body that are timed based on what this sort of light signal is inputting. Right. So we live in a totally different world. So that's what I wanted to kind of bring forth a little bit, is if we want to live a long time, then we've got to remember some of these principles that have been with us for a very, very long time. We cannot forget about them. We cannot supplement our way out of them. We cannot use high-tech devices to try to recreate them. Nature it operates in such a way that we must align with it if we want to give ourselves the greatest chance. So that was kind of the impetus to sort of create the Human Longevity Project 9-part film series that we created, was to use the blue zones as a template, as a model to be able to educate on why, gardening and working your fields impacts the microbiome, impacts mitochondrial health, right? So we kind of tied it into sort of modern understandings, why not having central heating in your house, as bad as that might sound, especially if you're in a colder environment, may actually be a sort of good thing to your biology, because it's putting a specific type of stressor in the namely heat and cold, in such a way that your biology is going to respond favorably. It's going to help you become more resilient in the face of stress. So, and you see this now, right? One of the big things in the health movement is saunas, whether they're infrared or conventional. And then we have cold plunges, right? These ice baths and cold plunges. So we're re-engaging some of these things. We're doing it in our own way. That's okay too, right? This is a more modern way to do it. But the principles are important to recognize, right? So again, I mentioned that in the blue zones, they don't do meditation, yoga, breath work, right? Yoga nidra. I mean, I'm in Southern California, so we get all this stuff, right? And yet, it's really important that we do that, because we are in such a highly stimulating environment. We are in constant stimulation. We don't turn off, that we actually have to actively take measures to sort of turn things off, to slow things down, right? And so, again, it's not to say you must go live like them and walk 30 kilometers a day and live in this totally different way. It's to say, okay, we live this way. How can we make some improvements? How can we modify our living? And how can we add some of these things that can help bring some balance to basically a chaotic world that we're all living in?
I love that. And, I love how you differentiate between chronological aging and biological aging. I talk about the whole aging thing, getting older thing, depends how you want to refer to it, I guess, a lot on my show, because it's an issue for me. I'm on the second half of my life here. And yeah, I mean, stuff's getting real here. Like, I'm now starting to understand what people have been talking about that are, quote unquote, more, let's see, have more years on the planet than I do. Let's put it that way. And I love talking about it, because like you and so many people that are, the wounded healer or going on their heroine or hero's journey, it was from my own problems that I got into the work that I'm doing today. And a lot of that was because I was told answers that I didn't accept. Like, okay, I don't accept just because I'm getting older. And we hear that a lot. It's such a cop-out, in my opinion. They just don't have any clue. And I think the key, Jason, and I'd like your opinion on this, is for us to have the discretion to know what we can control and what we can't. Because the good news is a lot more you can control than you've been told. But there are things that you can't control. And that's the stuff where you got to go zen and you got to wrap your brain around. As a woman, yeah, my skin's changing. Yeah, I have less hair on my head. Like, weird stuff's happening. My body's changing. My energy level is changing. And it's like, okay, like, I can't fight the current. Am I going to go get surgery and, do all these crazy things and try to, quote unquote, look younger? I mean, Jason, everybody wants to feel good, look good, be attractive. But how do we find that peace of, okay, yes, we are going to die. I don't know who the hell's saying we're not going to die, but that just goes against all the rules of nature and life. But it's part of the cycle, right? Death, birth, rebirth.
You would think it's a common knowledge.
I mean, who's even saying that? They're probably just trying to get attention. I don't know. That's just nuts. But how do we find that Tao, the middle ground, the peace of, okay, these are things I really can control. These are things I can't, and I have to really be okay with it, because it gets harder as you get older. It's easy for a younger person to be like, yeah. But when it's actually happening, everybody, it's like, damn, this stuff's real. This is hard.
There's a certain level of I think, acceptance to reality, but also on a deeper level, it's an appreciation of what life really is. It's the appreciation of the sort of divinity of process itself, right? So process is divine, right? In other words, if I have a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, they can't rush the process, right? When they're in the cocoon, that is a process. So no matter what we do, if we try to rush that, or a chick hatching from an egg, right? There is a process happening there. So I think it's an appreciation for the process itself. It's the appreciation for the now. We have to, I think we have the opportunity to reframe all of this. In other words, you will never be more useful than you are today.
Yeah.
Right. So appreciate that, right? Like really, really appreciate, like we can meditate on these things, meditate on death, meditate on where you at now. Look, sorry to say, like, generally speaking, it's all downhill. Right? Like it ain't getting any better. So,
ouch. You're killing me, Jason. You're killing me.
That's an important thing to recognize, because it means that right now is so beautiful. It is such a gift, right? Like, I mean, I actually recently hurt my finger at the gym and had a few stitches. And it was like, as soon as I lost the function of this ring finger, I appreciated how nice it is to have a ring finger, right? Like, unfortunately, this is part of the human condition, is that we don't really appreciate what we have until we lose it. So we are going to lose our youthful vigor. That is a reality. So that means go do what you can today, right? If that wasn't the case, I mean, look, imagine living 500 years. Imagine living never dying. To me, that sounds like hell. Honestly, the only way we really appreciate this stuff is because there's a beginning, an end. Right. So all the stuff happening in the middle, all the transitionary aspects of it are the beauty. It is beautiful that, I was younger and I had more vigor and I could lose fat faster and I could build muscle quicker. And I didn't have as many wrinkles and gray hair. And there was all this stuff, and when I was younger, I had more ignorance. Right. I wasn't as wise as I am today. So this is, to me, the call that I want to make out into this sort of podcast and in the health spheres. Start to appreciate what you're moving into. We don't have elders in our society. We're severely lacking elders. And so when I do a lot of the travel that I did with on another film project, working with indigenous healers from around the world in a variety of traditions, they have elders. They have people that have this wisdom, and so you can actively step into that part of your life, right? And we might call it grandparents or what have you, but I think if we can embrace this idea, there's such a beauty in that age group. Yeah, there's wrinkles and gray hair and generally a little bit more belly fat and all these things, right? That comes with it. But if we step into the grandmother role, the grandfather role, the elder role, there's a beauty that comes with that. So it's like we're shedding this identity of the youthful, no wrinkle, trim, vigorous self. And we're stepping into one that's slowing down, one that's just kind of the wise sage, sitting, observing, educating, leading, guiding, right? So I think, to me, this is the process, is that we're all going through this. And if we can appreciate each part of that journey, then there is no downside. It's just we've let one part of it go, and we're stepping into another part. If we are struggling, holding on for dear life to the youth, and look, I see this a ton in Hollywood, and some very beautiful actors and actresses when they were young look horrendous, in my opinion, because they've done so much work, and it just looks awkward and weird, and I don't see them anymore. Like I don't, and then I see some other people who didn't do so much work and I still see them. Yes, a few more wrinkles. Yes, more gray hair, right? No question, these things, but I can still see them. But when we have so much of this work done, and I'm really not trying to be critical, but I'm trying to invite this natural aging process to. This is a problem we have in our society of perception. It's self-perception and it's perception of the other. To me, we have an opportunity to sort of reframe that, to look for the wise elder, to let go of the sort of more vanity aspects. And that's the work that we do internally, right? I mean, I'm certainly not saying that I have all of that let go by any stretch. I still have the vain part of me that shows up every day. And if I can just let it go little by little, then I think that the act of getting older, both biologically and chronologically, we're going to have a lot more acceptance within that, right? My body's getting older, like it's breaking down. As much as I do what I can to avoid that process, it's happening, right? So the invitation that I find is, okay, what does my body actually need now? Does it need to go to the gym and lift hard weights like I did when I was younger and do all kinds of high intensity interval training and all this stuff? Or is it inviting me into a different aspect of mobility training, of yoga, of qigong, of energy working the energies within myself in a different way?
Building. Yeah.
Exactly. So
resourcing yourself.
It's really the act of letting go of the former identities and stepping into what's coming. And that's a cool thing. Like we don't know what's coming. We can see it and we can internalize that a little bit, but we don't know what it's like to get 10 years older. We'll only realize that when we're there. So to me, it's a cool discovery process, as long as we can just let go of this idea that I'm going to just hold on to my youth, right? Like it's a trap. And it's when I see people get stuck in and it looks miserable. And there's other people, that I look up to that are embracing the elder roles. And I think, wow, that's awesome. Look at them go, because it's like a different version of that person. And they're stepping into something more magical, more, something more
evolving.
needed.
Evolution is supposed to go forward, not hang on to the now. Otherwise you're not moving forward. Embracing it. And I love everything that you said. So just a couple of things I want to add. So I have a online women's circle, and one of the times that we met, I had everybody bring a picture of themselves at obviously an earlier stage of life, not a current picture. And I talked about how if you look at that picture, you probably bring up good memories of like a time in your life, it was at a party or whatever. And like, wow, look at how good my hair looks. Look at my body. I was so fit. And look at my skin and all this stuff. And it's like, well, and if you look at yourself right now, one day you're going to say that about right now. So to your point about it, I love that you said about appreciating. I'm not so much the part about it's going downhill from there, but really that's just such an important thing, because this is a really good time. And someday you're going to look back on now and be like, damn, I wish I knew like how much I was able to do, because, it's going to change. And also in Greek mythology, a curse on humans would be to make them live forever. There was several gods and goddesses that were cursed by the gods would punish them for different behaviors by making them live forever. So it wasn't like a good thing if you were a human to live forever, because everything that, and I think there's a few movies on that, like everything that you love won't and will die and change. You see all the people you love die. And I mean, it's not supposed to be the way it is. And
Go ahead.
Well, the last thing I was just going to say about, I'm so glad you mentioned the thing about wise elders, Jason, because almost every show I talk about that. We don't have wise elders in our culture. We don't have rites of passage anymore. I mean, all these major things that happen in life, like our women's first period and even your first date, getting married, menopause. I mean, men don't have rites of passage anymore. In certain cultures, they were meant to accomplish certain things as a warrior before they were allowed to marry and to prove that they were men and to be a leader. And I mean, we don't have any of that stuff. So I'm so glad you mentioned about wise elders and stepping into that role with pride and with self-awareness and with appreciation. But Jason, it's going to take the culture also valuing it, though. So it'd be one thing for Amy and Jason to say, all right, we're going to step in, we're going to be the wise elders. But everybody else is like, yeah, get out of here, you old, whatever. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm now the old person at the party or whatever. So how do we help the culture shift so we're not the one doing it by ourselves?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing is that the elders must show up, right? The elders must be there first, right? What's a young person going to do, right? Some aren't aware that they want or need a sort of elder or guidance, but some are aware and they're looking for them and they can't find them. But the idea is that as those of us who are on the way there, if we can show up as the elder, there will be people who are looking for advice, who are looking for guidance, who are looking for the things that you have. I mean, the greatest gift is your experience, right? And so if we can disseminate that from the heart, right, then that is going to shift the younger generations. And so that's got to be there first. And so there's no risk in sort of stepping into that role, but I think I want to go back on something earlier that I kind of mentioned, which is this idea of death, right? It's a very interesting concept because we don't really face it enough in our culture. It's a very weird thing that we don't encounter death. We see it on TV and we have a very distorted view of death and a perception of death, but we actually don't encounter it much. We're not hunting and killing livestock personally as much as we used to, right? We don't experience death before us, amongst us, like we did in the past, right? Yep. When somebody dies, there's this, it's kind of a whitewashing often, right? And
it's very sterilized and removed. Yeah, like even the coffin can be closed and
exactly. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of like, we just don't want to look. Right. It's like, if we just don't look, then it doesn't happen. Right. And so we have a different reality than a lot of other cultures around the world when it comes to death. And so to me, it's like, I don't know if I can change that. Me being me, I can't just go stare at death all the time. I mean, I could go into maybe hospice care would be an interesting one, but beyond just like radically go seeking out death, I think it's worth meditating on death, right? It's thinking about your own mortality. Super, super important, right? If I can just meditate on death, what is death? When am I going to die? What does it look like? What's going to happen when I die? I mean, the interesting thing is that when we die, the world keeps going, right? I mean, it just keeps going. Like, so when you start to ruminate and sit with death and this idea of your own mortality, it ignites certain aspects within you, right? It ignites this idea that it's finite, that I've got limited time. So use this precious resource as best I can. It disintegrates fear of other people, of what other people care about and what they think of you, right? Like you just start becoming more you step into life more, the more you think about and contemplate death. And even in some of these other cultures, right? Like the ayahuasca cultures in particular, and the Tibetan cultures, there's an act of going into death, right? So we actually experience, so to speak, death through the ayahuasca ceremonies, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, right? There's acts of sort of going through the death process while you were alive. And I've gone through that myself. I've seen many people go through that. And what happens, and you look at anybody who's had a near-death experience and what happens after that, there's a radical shift in the way they approach life, right? So there's something really, really important about accepting death, embracing death, looking at it straight in the face, welcoming it, right? That's a different energy, right? And then once you have that sort of foundation established, right? I'm getting older, I'm going to die, right? Like things will denigrate and there's all kinds of good stuff, no question, but that's the trajectory, that's the direction, right? If we can get comfortable with that and accept that, then we can start building upon that and doing some of these anti-aging things and longevity things, because there's a recognition that I'm going to die. It's finite life. It's a precious resource. So it's not a submission into that and a letting go of all the things. It's actually using that as a foundation for self-care, for this seeking of better health, of better relationships, of a deeper connection to self, right? Deeper connection to God. That is a fundamental foundation that we can build upon, right? So without that, then we have these distorted perceptions that, again, I think it's Aubrey de Grey And he's a pretty famous longevity guy in the space. And I think he's the one that really talks about living forever and death is a disease and all these things, right? And that's a different mentality. That's a kind of a scientific mentality. Wow. And I appreciate some of the things he's doing. So I'm not totally denigrating him here, but I think these distorted ideas about how to extend life, how to be healthy, start to show up when you lose the foundation of reality, right? And that foundation is so important. So again, because we are not immersed in the cycle of life and death often enough in our Western culture, and it's a sterilized, birth is sterilized to a large degree, death is sterilized to a large degree. We have all these cosmetic procedures and ways that we can create the perception that we are younger than we are, and it's a very bizarre thing, right? So so I think that's the first step, is to embrace it, to step into it mentally, emotionally, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't do the plastic surgery, you can't use makeup or hair dye or any of that stuff. That's fine too. But if I have that foundation laid of the acceptance of my lifespan and the precious time that I have here, then that's really what's important. And again, we can all go at any moment. So to some degree, this idea of longevity is just kind of a funny thing. We think that, oh, I'm going to live to, hear these people, I'm going to live to 180. It's like, okay, you can get hit by a bus tomorrow. So as long as you recognize that, then that's important.
Plus, of course, obviously, it's all about quality. Who the hell would want to live 180 if nothing works? You can't see, you can't remember who you are, any of that stuff. But so,
and that was a comment I wanted to make earlier, actually,
please.
Is that this is what we saw in speaking with people that are in their 90s, 100 and beyond, is that you see that everybody they know has passed, essentially, right? So you were talking about living to a really, really long time. Like that's a very different reality. In fact, I asked that 94-year-old gal from Loma Linda, I said, your husband's passed, many of your family and your kids have passed.
Kids could be dead. Yeah.
I said, what gets you up every morning? She said, well, I have to learn this song for the violin class on Wednesday.
That's
right.
Awesome.
And I thought, what a beautiful answer, because what That's she awesome. Recognized was that, yes, the reality around her shifts, but that doesn't actually determine who she is and what life is about, right? So she was really living in the moment, and she appreciated what she was there for. It wasn't to make it to 95. It wasn't to do anything other than get up and learn the violin for the class on Wednesday. So that is a reality too, that I think we must recognize, that this idea of me doing all these cool things with the health technology that's out there now and what's coming, and living to this, let's say 150, what does that look like? Does that look like me kind of just limping around for 30 years of my life, still hanging on with very few loved ones around me to support me, maybe some distant great grandchildren, that don't really contact me, so it's, again, I point to this idea that who cares about that age? And look, when you meet people that are in their 90s and beyond 100, they don't look particularly happy, I would say. I mean, they can be, but it's kind of this like very weird middle ground of death's looming, and the core essence of my life is already passed. So it's not necessarily this beautiful sight when you see
my prime.
Yeah.
Like I'm out of my prime. Yeah.
So again, it's like it brings us back to now. It brings us back to the capability, the capacity, the connections, right? The ability to engage with the world right now. Like that's what's really, really important. So that's why, go ahead.
I think you're hitting on something just absolutely critically important. Okay. Because what we're talking about is what you're living for. Okay. So identifying, regardless of your age, like what is worth living for? Like that beautiful example of that older woman who just, was looking forward to playing the violin. I'm sure you've heard of Dr. Mario Martinez, right? Yeah, of course. He was on the show. I think it was episode 80, which everyone absolutely has to listen to, because he is a pioneer on the cultural portals of aging and how culture is involved. This is for the audience, I know you know, but how culture influences a lot of our concept and our biology in aging. And he gives so many examples in a lot of his work of when he interviews these centenarians, and he'll ask them, he had this one man, I think he was like 99, and he had a garden. And Mario asked him something like, "Oh, okay, what are you building there? You're planting something else." He said, "Yeah." he said, I'm planting some new tomatoes. And he said, oh, that's great. That's great. You're getting that done. He's like, yeah, just come back in a couple of years and wait to see how big they are. Type thing. Like, as in he didn't even acknowledge, like, yeah, but he's 99. Like, he might not be alive in a couple of years. So they just live for what is interesting and what's passionate to them. And they have boundaries of, like, you know, one of them smokes one cigar every night. One has a martini every night, not two, not three, one. Like, but so they engage in things that are pleasurable, give them a reason for living, joy of living, pleasure in living, to want to live. And before I throw it back to you, I just want to share with the audience one of my favorite quotes is, and it's escaping me, the gentleman that said it. He's a physicist, and he said, I'll try to get it for the show notes, but he said, the masculine teaches us what's worth dying for, and the feminine teaches us what's worth living for. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's the essence of it. So for the audience, for all of us, I think a big takeaway that Jason's directing us towards is to really identify, particularly as you get older, what are you living for? Are you living for your kids? Are you living for your job? What is your reason for wanting to be engaged in this life? And we have to find the things that make our hearts sing. And if you don't know, that's job number one.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's two aspects of this, right? There's some people that have found a big purpose, right? Like this really huge purpose that they're living for, like a Tony Robbins type guy, right? Like just massive purpose, right? And then there's other people that have these sort of little purposes that keep them going throughout the day that aren't these big, massive dreams, right? Vic Strecker, who is a professor at the University of Michigan, we interviewed him for the Human Longevity Project, and he was telling us about his daughter who had a heart condition, I think at birth or just after birth. So they did a heart surgery on her at like 6 months or 9 months or something that was like the youngest they'd ever done. And they didn't know how long she was going to live. So literally it was from that moment on, every day could have been her last, because the heart surgery was so severe and they had no prior records of anything like this. So they had nothing to go on. Yeah. And so he was taught at a very early age, my daughter could die tomorrow. Oh, and so that process of being in the hospital, there was a janitor that would stop by these kids that didn't have parental figures coming in or caregivers coming in very often, that were in the hospital. They were in pretty severe cases, right? And so that was his sort of purpose or reason for living, was he was stopping by, a janitor, right? Wow, and he was showing love to these kids, right? And so these are the type of things that I think many of us can identify with. And because some of us may not even want or have some big dream purpose, but we have a purpose within our family, our local community, right? There's something that we can live for, even if it's just playing the violin, learning a new sort of instrument. And like, by the way, she was 94 and she picked up this instrument at 92, right? So we can have these little things throughout our life that are reason for living, you know. And there was a 97-year-old in Okinawa that we met with, who was climbing her orange trees at 95, and her daughter kind of told her to stop, like, hey, you can't stop picking orange trees from your dangerous, at 95, right? But same thing, she had a garden, she was living, she had a day-by-day purpose, right? And that's that is really, really critical. And that's what you find with most people around the world that are living beyond 90 and 100, is that they have a day-to-day living purpose. That's it. They never had any big dreams. They didn't have any big profession that they were chasing. They had this appreciation for life as it is, right? And they let go of this idea of trying to live a long time. That was never their goal. You know, in fact, many of them would say it's up to God, right? And so they just let it go. And what's beautiful about that is that because of the way that they live, they had the foundations right. The biggest study on happiness was the Harvard Happiness Study, right? And it was related to connections. It was related to friendship and love. And so the connections and the friendships are the biggest determining factor of happiness. And happiness is the most impactful aspect of longevity, right? So it's really not about what do I do and how do I eat and all these things. It's more about how do I live my life in such a way that creates a reality on a day-to-day basis that is conducive to health, right? And that is living with purpose, enjoying each day, having the connections, finding safety. Most of us don't feel safe in our bodies because of traumas and things that happen when we were young. So sometimes we have to go resolve some of those things, right?
And the world nowadays.
Exactly. And there's cultural aspects that we're all dealing with, right? So there's bigger things at play when it comes to longevity. And so that's really the kind of the essence of the film. And sure, we got into the microbiome and mitochondria, because those are critical and sort of the biological aspects of health and the communication between those two. So this is the cool part, is that we have the microbiome. Organisms live all around us, and we have these mitochondria that live within our cells that are, kind of these own self-directed organisms with their own DNA. And then we have, of course, our own human DNA. So we have these three different organisms, and they all communicate with one another, right? And so we have environmental signals coming at us all the time, whether it's food, thoughts, right? The sun, right? The water that we're drinking, the air that we're breathing. All these environmental signals are communicating with these sort of genetic structures within our body that are all talking to one another and trying to coordinate function based off of whatever the environmental signal is. So the key is to get the environment right? The key is to get your environment right. This means your mental environment. What are the thoughts that you're having? Be conscious of those. See if you can change those, right? What are the emotional sort of frameworks that you're operating in, right? It doesn't mean don't feel sad and angry, and there's no bad emotion, but it actually means feel those fully and be aware of those feelings, right? So,
and don't get stuck in them. Then move them. Like, don't stay there too long.
We're looping, right? Then that's a problem. But it's what is the mental emotional framework that we're operating under, right? What's the physical conditions, right? So it's really looking at the environmental impact on our bodies, because everything is going to impact how our genes function. So it's getting all of that right. And in my book, Beyond Longevity, that's what I go into, is all of these things that are important to get right, to allow for our genetic structure to express health, right? Because health is an innate thing that is built within us. So it is a God-given quality to being alive, is health. And so sure, we lose capacity. We lose stem cells as we get older. We lose peptide signaling as we get older. This is a part of the process of aging. And by the way, we don't even know what aging is. We don't actually have a true definition for it. In fact, I asked probably 50
when's
different.
It start? Yeah, as soon as you're
I asked
born.
50 different people that are in the health and medical field, and not a single person gave me the same answer. So we don't even have a definition of what aging is, and we certainly don't know what causes it. So this is a big misconception in the health world, is that we're confusing biological damage with aging. Aging is a process. We don't know which genes we don't know. We have Yamanaka factors, which are probably the closest thing. And these are gene transcripts that they've identified, that they've sort of modified in mice to help them live longer. But we actually don't know what is causing aging. When does it begin? What is causing this process to unfold? Why do we lose telomeres? Or telomeres are actually not really the issue, by the way.
Yeah, they shorten.
They shorten, but we can lengthen them. Yeah, and that's a rabbit hole that I actually don't want to go down.
Okay.
But stem cells are kind of the new big thing, right? Why do we lose them, right? If we can create them, why do we lose them? Right. So there's, again, even with telomeres, we have an enzyme called telomerase, which helps extend telomeres, right? We have DNA damage. Well, we can repair the DNA damage. So all the damages that happen in the body, we have the capacity to repair. So the question is why aren't we able to keep up with the damage? Why does damage inevitably override the amount of repair that can take place? Right. And sure, we can play catch up. So we can sort of anti-age by cleaning up some of the damage, by changing our lifestyle, eating better foods, doing things like fasting and getting good sleep and exercise and good relationships. All these things can help repair damage. But the question is why is it like a one directional thing on the broad scale, right? Why can't we keep up? We don't know. We actually don't know what causes aging.
Because we're not designed to live forever. That's why.
That is the fundamental truth, I think. And there's actually a theory called antagonistic pleiotropy, which is related to sort of evolutionary biology, which is to say that the same genes that are responsible for sexual development and sexual maturity are related, are directly responsible for aging itself. So in other words, we're trading off the benefit of the individual for the benefit of the whole, right? We're sort of sacrificing the individual. We're creating sexual reproduction, which confers a benefit to the species, right? But the individual is the sort of the sacrificial lamb in that story. So if that's the case, that the same genes are responsible for sexual development that are responsible for aging, then we can't, at least we don't know how to separate those at this point, right? So so again, there's really interesting aspect, but the evidence for that is, well, first of all, the entirety of history, because I don't think anybody has lived forever or lived beyond 120 years that we know of. There's stories, of course, but we haven't seen any recent evidence of this. And if you look at animals, right, and other species, we don't see these outliers. You know, we don't see an elephant living to 240 years, right? We see these sort of finite lifespans in every animal. And sure, we can modulate that, right? Certain animals will live longer in captivity than they do in the wild. But we don't see these dramatic outliers. So there's something controlling the aging process, and it's likely tied to sexual development.
That's super interesting. I did not know that at all. Well, I love how you kind of touched back on that point we made earlier about having the discretion to know between what you can control and what you can't. Because what I always say is, just because it's typical doesn't mean it's normal. Like, because people are looking around them and they just see, I think back to Mario Martinez's work is the cultural portal. We're expecting to get more decrepit as we get older. We're expecting to be ache and painy when we roll out of bed in the morning, and people say, oh, I'm having a senior moment. I'm forgetting where my keys are. And, it's like our culture is kind of setting us up for a self-fulfilling prophecy. And what I always say is because people, frequently will comment on my age and my vitality and whatnot, and my ability to do certain things. And I said, just because, you're seeing it all around you doesn't mean it has to be that way. And that's the way it's supposed to be. So I love that you're kind of reiterating that. And, I love I've been trying to study your work. I'm so impressed by all of it, obviously, which is why I had you on the show. And I like how you kind of summarize for us that what you discovered in your study of these centenarians and these healthy older people is they had some things in common. Like they had and you touched on them a little bit, very simple lives. They had simplicity. They were in nature or connected with nature, and they had close family ties. What also was super interesting that I'd like you to expand upon just for a moment or two is how you also found that they all worked very hard. They had physically, I don't want to say manual labor, but they had to work, the laundry. They had to like get up and do stuff. So it created a resiliency in them, in mind, body, and spirit. And they also learned to move slower, to go with the flow, to go with rhythm. And the convenience and comfort were not priorities that they valued. So that's exactly the flip of what we're doing. It's all about, the call up and get your food delivered in 20 minutes and, microwave this and that and Instacart that and, espresso coffee and, oh, I need that email sent to me by tomorrow or, so you found that no, convenience and comfort weren't of value. They didn't operate that way at all. But back to your point, in our modern world, Jason, we can't, we kind of have to. There's an urgency and expectancy. So, Jason, how can we learn from your research and apply it to the modern world in a way that works and we still can function?
Yeah. So, I think the first thing is to embrace discomfort, right?
Okay.
I don't know anybody who has not experienced discomfort in their life. We're all going to experience discomfort. We're all going to experience pain. We're all going to experience suffering, right? The difference between many people that I know is some people embrace that. Some people, when the discomfort comes, they don't run away from it right away. They meet it and they investigate it, so to speak. And sometimes the discomfort's not, you don't want to sit in it, right? Sometimes it's actually a no. Okay. But sometimes that discomfort is the threshold by which if you push through, you're going to achieve something greater. You're going to move into a different reality. Right. And a lot of this in my work that I do now has to do with trauma resolution and some of these things. Right. This is very uncomfortable stuff to go into that stuff, but it is a necessary evil to speak, so to speak, because if we go into it with support, with the proper care, we can move through it. And on the other side is something so tremendous. That's what they experience in a very real way. right? The discomfort of having to work the land, of having to walk 30 kilometers to go, bring some cheese from the mountain regions to go exchange for fish from the seaside to bring it back up to the mountains, right? For the women worked extremely hard around the house, taking care of everything and everybody, right? So this is not a comfortable life. And it's all they knew to some degree. So it's a reality that was already ingrained within them. They saw it when they were growing up. They experienced it, and there was nowhere to run. So there's a certain aspect of this discomfort that is really, really important to face. If we continue to avoid discomfort and we continue to follow the easy life and the comfort and the convenience, it brings nothing but pain. It's going to bring more pain down the line, right? That is just the reality. You may just not understand how it's showing up. So I think that's a big one, right? And again, I like some of these things, right? The cold, right? Ice baths, these are great ones. Cold showers. That's a perfect example of a discomfort that almost everybody, when they first engage with it, is like, hell no, this is not fun. This is
every day. I'm like, I don't want to do this.
Why would I do this?
Single day.
Right.
I'm like, just before I turn that knob, I'm like, oh,
That's right.
I could skip one day, and it's like, no. But yes,
right.
so hermetic stress is what you're talking about. Right?
Hormetic stress, yes. Yeah. And so, but when you do that, there's something happened with your mental framework. It gets a little bit more resilient. You get a little bit stronger mentally. In other words, you now perceptually can handle more. And you've proven it to yourself. This then translates to your entire reality. And that's just on the mental level. If we get into what's happening on the physiological level, same thing. That cold stress is actually conferring a benefit to the body because the signal is being sent. The body has to say, okay, what's this? We got to adapt. We got to create an adaptive mechanism to handle this stressor, right? And so this is the idea of hormetic stress. Same thing when you go out in the sun, right? You and I are both light-skinned. If we go out in the sun for a little bit, it's pretty good. We go out for a little bit longer, still maybe even a little bit better. Go out for too long, not a good idea, right? So there's this perfect ideal window of stressor that the body's going to pick up a signal and go say, there's something in the environment that's challenging me right now. I must create an adaptation to handle it. And so these are the adaptations. Exercise is, of course, probably the most famous and obvious one, right? When I exercise, it's going to create a stress on my body, and then my body's going to respond accordingly, assuming that it has the correct resources to do so and the time, it will adapt and respond. And that's what makes my muscles bigger, my nervous system stronger, et cetera, right? So we want to embrace this idea of discomfort because that hormetic stressor is going to provide this sort of greater resilience, this anti-fragility that is really, really necessary as we get older, right? So right now, I'm doing a lot more, as I mentioned, as I get older, I'm doing a lot more sort of corrective exercise, mobility training, strengthening my knees. And listen, none of this is comfortable, right? When I get into some of these poses or positions, it's really not uncomfortable. I do a lot of fascial work, right? That's another great one to do. It's
that
literally,
hurts.
It's not ideal at all. But what happens is that as in fact, there's a practice I love called block therapy. And the idea is to use this sort of wooden or bamboo block, and you kind of lay on it using gravity, and you're actually looking for the pain points in your fascia. And then you sit there with it and you breathe through it. And you don't want to find, if it's too painful, then you're sort of counterproductive. But you find this like ideal sweet spot and the perfect amount of pressure that creates a lot of pain and allows you to breathe through it. So this is a very counterintuitive thing. I'm actually looking for pain, and then I'm just going to sit in it. Like that doesn't sound like a good idea. But what happens is that is going to melt the tissue. It's going to create flow. It's going to create a greater sense of prana and chi and oxygen and nitric oxide and all the beneficial waste products moving out and all the nutrients moving into that tissue that was hypoxic, that didn't get enough energy, didn't get enough oxygen. So we can actually melt these adhesions through something like that, right? So,
well, that's the principle behind getting a massage and trigger point. They hold that trigger point, and you think you're going to fall off the table, but what is they hold it until the muscles stop holding the constant contraction, and then they finally surrender, and that's when you get the release. And like you said, then you get the blood flow, and then you get the mobility and all that.
That's
So
right.
you must be familiar with Kelly Slater's work and like
Oh
all
yeah,
the myofascial release. So any
totally.
of that, like foam rolling,
Roll thing.
what's her name? Jessica, whatever, with that little Theraball. And yeah, those are great. I teach those on my classes online.
And there's another
So
aspect to
valuable.
this. Yeah, there's another aspect to this sort of seeking out discomfort in a way, which is something on the other spectrum, which is like meditation, right? And this idea of going within. Now, many people struggle with meditation because it provides a certain type of discomfort, right? Discomfort of the self, discomfort of calmness, discomfort of ease, discomfort of well-being. Many of us, because of our childhood, because of the conditioning, and probably I'd say most of us, and there's a spectrum, so it's a measure of degree, but almost all of us have gone through some level of discomfort with this idea of ease, of well-being, because at some point, as a baby, as a child, we experience well-being, and then because we were in the sort of the safe place and everything was good, eventually it became unsafe, right? There was something that happened, and I didn't trust this idea of isolation, of safety, of well-being. So we actually get conditioned that those things are not safe. In other words, if I'm not doing something, if I'm not actively doing something, if I'm not actively moving around, thinking, getting something done, then it's unsafe. I can't just be, because many of us, again, in that state when we were younger, we didn't get to experience the well-being when I was just being. And so that's another kind of discomfort that when we go into some of these more meditative experiences, you might hear people going into dark rooms. That's a big one now. There's all kinds of different things.
Sensory deprivation chambers and all
Totally,
that stuff.
totally.
Yeah.
But even more basic, just sitting with oneself for an hour, meditating, and all these thoughts are happening. People can't do it.
I know people who can't take a Sunday to just kind of,
That's right.
piddle around the house in the morning, stay in their pajamas till about 9 or 10. And like, I'll talk to them on the phone. They'll be like, "Oh, I'm still in my pajamas. I haven't." I'm like, "It's freaking Sunday. It's 10 o'clock. Like you're acting like it's been a month and it's, I don't know, like, come on." Like that's true.
And there's a story that runs in the background that says, well, I just enjoy
productive.
doing all these things. I enjoyed working. I enjoy.
Yeah, that's true. That's what people say. I feel good. I actually just talked to someone who said the exact same thing. But I like working. I like working all the time.
There's an element of truth to that. But what is really underneath that is there's a discomfort of just being.
And not being worthy and feeling like you have to earn your worth.
That's right. So that's where the discomfort can come in, is in these sort of weird aspects of just being and relaxing. Unless you're on a beach on a vacation, that's a different thing. But even then, some people still can't shut off. Right. So that's true. So there's these weird points of discomfort. So if we can bring awareness to those, there's real opportunity as we move through those, move beyond those. So again, these are the very things that are actually preventing us from living a long, healthy life. Are the childhood traumas, are the conditionings, these discomforts that we are afraid to face are preventing us from our nervous system actually letting go. So we can actually look at this, look at the parasympathetic tone. We can look at the sympathetic. We can look at heart rate variability, right? These heart rate variability is probably the biggest benchmark right now that is the most easily accessible to determine one's state of health. And so if the heart rate variability is high, in other words, my heart is changing its beats based off of sort of micro fluctuations, that's a good sign. It means that I have good adaptability. If the heart rate variability is low, that's not a very good sign. And so we can actually measure this. And what you'll find is that everybody has a certain baseline of what rest is. But then when you get some of these things resolved, these traumas, these conditionings, you actually find another level of rest. In other words, the heart rate variability increases. The depth of the parasympathetic tone increases. Now in the body, we actually have a different state of rest. So I think this is what rest is. If I do some work and I increase my heart rate variability and all these other things, I can actually find a new level of rest. And that's what's happening in the body level, in the nervous system level. So many of us, we just don't understand how our nervous system is operating on a minute by minute, day by day basis.
And we're so used to that certain level. And I'll go back to my massage analogy, is that, I say all the time, after you get a good massage, probably a good yoga class or whatever, you don't realize how tight you were before the massage, because that becomes your new normal, your new set point. It's like
That's right.
getting healthy or being fit or anything. Everything's relative. And being in a relationship, I said it before, once I got out of a really bad relationship and I got in a good one, and I was like, wow, I didn't realize how bad the last one was, because now I have a reference to a good one. So to your nervous system point, that's really true. Yeah, it becomes your new normal.
This is what's wild about humans, is that we are very adaptable creatures, right? That's the cool thing. That means that whatever comes at us, we have biologically, mentally, and emotionally, and spiritually, the capacity to adapt, which is awesome. And the downside to that is that if we encounter an environmental stimulus often enough, we get conditioned to it. So if we had parents or caregivers that operated in a certain way, we will configure both our mental frameworks, our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors, and our biology, our internal biology, our gene expression will configure to that environment.
Wow.
Right. So imagine a child that lived in a certain environment. Let's say dad was an alcoholic and got abusive with maybe mom and maybe some of the kids sometimes. Right. And then was really loving when he wasn't drinking. Right. Imagine that from a psychological standpoint of a child. That child must be really adaptable, because they want the love of dad when he's in a loving state, not drunk. Right. So they want it so bad. So they're going to be one way. Then when he's drinking, now they have to totally shift their behavior, their thoughts, their everything, and their internal physiology shifts. So now that's going to create chaos as that child gets older. Even after they left the house, that memory, that conditioning on the biological level, on the mental level, on the emotional level, unless it's actively changed, will be conditioned to operate throughout life, again, until something changes, right? So that's a very extreme example, but we all experience something like that with our parents, with our teachers, with our siblings, with our everybody through our life. And particularly those first, let's say, 10 years of life really are critical for what happens for the next, few decades. That's how our biology is going to be conditioned until we actively go in there and sort of recondition that, right? So that's mental processes, it's emotional loops. It's, again, also in the biology, right? So these can be hardwired into our system, and until we get those reset, it's going to negatively impact. This is what you see with the ACEs study that Kaiser Permanente did with the CDC a couple decades ago, and what they looked at the childhood traumas and how it impacted, and they only identified 10, right? This was like parents got divorced, abuse, neglect.
Death.
Yeah, there's a handful of them, right? But it totally was not exhaustive. It was like a very short list of what they identified as traumas. And as they tracked those 10 ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, they mapped that over the next few decades, right? And they found that the more ACEs somebody had, the more disease showed up. And this was all forms of disease, cancers, autoimmune conditions, right? Alcoholism, suicides, all the things you can mention. And that was irrespective of behavior. So in other words, you had somebody with a number of ACEs, a handful of traumas, and they didn't smoke cigarettes, they didn't drink alcohol. In other words, they were on the straight and narrow. They didn't do drugs. They had no bad habits, quote unquote, that we would identify, but yet they still had extremely higher risk for all these diseases. Right. And so what that's pointing to is that there's something happening internally. The biological framework is shifted because we are so conditionable. So this is what's happening. And going back to the Blue Zones work, when I looked at people there in their 90s, 100s, and I looked at the society around them, they had a societal framework that was supportive, that was connected, right? That provided safety and connection. Those two things. Safety is number one, right? This is the root chakra. This is the safety that comes in first. And when we come into this world, we must have safety. The second thing is connection. This is the loving connection when we enter this world between baby and caregiver. So when that connection is established. But this is also fundamental to our nervous system as we get older. So if we have a society, a familial network that provides safety and connection and support, that is so critical. Most of us in the West did not get a tremendous amount of that. There was misses, there was misattunements. As best as our parents tried, there was a lot of misses. And so they had a framework when they were children that set them up for success when they were 60 and 80 and 95. Most of us didn't. And so if we didn't, again, I would maybe even say all of us have some level of dysregulation with this aspect until we get that resolved. And so that's actively working in the background to create excess inflammation, lowered immune status, mental and emotional processes that are operating in the background that are inhibiting our own health and well-being, disrupted sleep, right? All of these things are impacted by what's happening in those early childhood years.
Okay, so but then the solution, because I like being about the solution, is what is obviously it's not too late. So just to give it to yourself now. I'm gonna assume.
Yeah. I mean, there's a great book called The 5 Personality Patterns. So that's a really good book. So the first step, I think, if this is new and you're, let's say, 52 and you're like, oh shit, I had a pretty rocky childhood, or I think I had a good childhood, but I'm not sure. First step is to identify, just bring awareness to your reality. Yeah. So I love some of these books like The 5 Personality Patterns because it shows us how our personalities come to be, right? And it actually has to do with childhood development, what we experienced, our natural, let's say, proclivities as an individual, our constitution, and we can actually map these things out to how we are. The next step is to actually go and get some resolution to some of these things that you either know were traumas. You may experience some pretty significant things throughout your life. There's therapists out there that can help us. And there's all kinds of therapists, right? That are beyond just the cognitive behavioral therapists and the modern sort of psychology. But there's all kinds of work that we can do. We can do adult attachment repair model. That's a fantastic modality taught by Peter Cummings. There are things like EMDR, which can help rewire sort of the neurological patterns. We can do family constellation work. So there's a lot of kinds of different things. Again, plant medicines in an indigenous setting that you feel safe and trusted in. That's another route. There's all kinds of pathways that we can take. But as we get resolution to those big traumas, that's important. And also it's the conditionings. So this is maybe the more pervasive and hard to identify aspects of ourselves, but what are the conditionings that we grew up with? And I'll tell you, one for me was you must work hard to basically get what you want, right? And this can show up as work hard to get love, work hard to get accepted, work hard to get safety, work hard to build wealth, a lot of these things. But this idea that you aren't enough unless you work hard. Now, hard work is great, but it is also not required for safety and connection and wealth and all these things that we want in our life.
And we talked about that in your first episode. So we'll just send everybody back there because you get really into great stuff with that. Really great. Mm-hmm.
And then another one that I suffered with was, it had to do with emotions. Stop being so emotional. Right. So I was actually conditioned in me to shut down my emotions, both by my caregivers and also because I was a lot, probably. I was too much for them to handle at that moment. Right. I had young parents. And so as a parent, I know there's days where I don't have much capacity. If my son's acting out, I don't have the capacity. Right. So there's that can happen on a pervasive basis. And then as I got into sports, I was generally the captain, the leader, the quarterback, the point guard, that type. And so I was constantly taught by my coaches to stay even keel. When things go wrong, don't lose your shit. When things go well, don't get too high. So in other words, they meant well. Wow. And there's a good lesson in that. And I was also reinforced, don't show emotion. So my whole life, I was taught to suppress my emotion. So, and so what did that mean? That means that if I was a good athlete, then I would get acceptance by not showing emotion. By being a kid, I would get the love and acceptance if I didn't show emotion. If I showed too much emotion, if I had outbursts or I was, which kids do, that's what emotion is. Emotion's most of the time not very pretty, right? So these are the things that were conditioned into me. So I've had to do a lot of work, and I continue to do work to decondition that, to be able to have good emotional flow, right? And so these are some of the things that I, have gone through and continue to experience, and some of these other conditionings. And there's all kinds of cultural conditionings. There's tons of familial conditions. Another one was around wealth and what it means to be wealthy, and is it okay? And rich people and poor people, and they have none and they have a lot. And there's a lot of conditionings around that. There's a lot of conditioning around racial aspects and all these identity groups that we find ourselves in, whether we're male or female, light skin, dark skin, Jewish heritage. There's all kinds of conditionings. And so this is something just to look at around who you are and who you've become, what are your thoughts? Are they actually your thoughts, or have they been essentially implanted into you by a culture, by your family, right? Religion is another big one.
We know by research that most of our thoughts are actually not even our own in origin.
That's
So,
right.
I mean, the programming is extensive, and that's, self-knowledge is the root of all health and happiness for sure. But Jason, let me just bring you back to the longevity thing. Did you find any research on differences with men and women at what was required for healthy aging?
No, not really. I mean, I'm sure the data points in a specific direction, and I don't actually don't even remember what the data shows, if it was men tend to live longer or women.
Or things that these cultures were doing that was unique to the gender that would help them, or nothing. They were all kind
One
of.
one of the interesting things that I did look at the data and I saw that was pretty funny, which was that if there was let's say a married couple, older married couple, if the husband died first, the wife tended to live longer. And if the wife died first, the husband didn't tend to live as long.
I
And
think
so there
that's
was
like
actually,
that in our culture. I think
yeah.
that's,
So there was
yeah,
like a nurturing aspect. It's like once the
yeah,
wife, because the
yeah,
wife tend to be still the caregiver and the nurturer
yeah,
to the man.
yeah.
And so I found that interesting. And the man was sort of like, in a sense, a burden, if you could look at it one way. And so the woman was freed up. And so it was interesting. I got a lot of humor out of that. But no, I mean, I think ultimately, it really comes down to just living in harmony, right? And so
Yeah.
look at it for a female, if she cycles properly, right? The woman's cycle is a beautiful aspect of detoxification, right? So many women in our culture have issues with their cycle. And so whether it's too heavy, too light, too long, too short, there's all kinds of,
PMS.
exactly, lots
It's an
going on there.
indicator of general health too.
That's
So
right.
just
And so
like a male's erection in the morning, same. Yeah. It's like a
exactly,
barometer.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's one aspect for a woman, that if she can get her cycle on track, that's a really good indicator for her as she gets older. And of course, eventually going into perimenopause and menopause, going through that transition in a so let's say healthy way, so to speak, that's going to be a really good indicator, right? So it's maybe even starting there and optimizing that. And if you're optimizing that as a woman, that may be one of the most obvious and great directions you can go in, because the things that are going to be required to get your cycle really optimized are all the things that are going to lead to health.
That's right. And they'd all require you not being on the pill. I'll just
Totally.
add. Yeah. And
Totally.
see my
Yeah.
episode with Dr. Nathan Riley on that, because the pill
That's
is
a big
like,
one.
wow.
Or the copper IUD and all these other things that
Oh,
can,
yeah.
really
They all
interfere.
deregulate your body's natural, not only your body's communication, but also its rhythms and its own clocks
That's
and
right.
all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Top 3 things for aging gracefully that you've learned?
I would say embrace simplicity
Yeah.
in every aspect of your life. And I could go on a diatribe about that, but wherever you're having complexity, see if you
Yeah.
can simplify. Even on your calendar, your apps on your phone, whatever the case is, see if you can simplify it. And it particularly relates to your water, your food, your relationships, the things that are really, really critical for your well-being. Simplify as much as you can. Continue to move. This is a big one throughout life, because at some point when the knees hurt and the back's getting a little, crooked, and we don't feel great moving, that's when we need to move, most of all. So it's continuing to move throughout life. It's a huge one. And I would say the third one has to be related to connections. So maintaining connection, and this is a big one, because we think connection, and it's connection to others, it's connections to pets, connections to self, connection to God, connection to nature, connection to the rhythms, right? So it's maintain, it's more of an archetypal aspect of connection. It's finding connection, even in this interview, right? As I see you through a screen, it's actually connection to you, but it's connection to this process that we're doing here, right? So it's how deep can we connect to everything that we are in the moment. That I think is a huge one, and it's a practice. I find that it's not something that I can do perfectly all the time. It's me returning back to this idea. Oh yeah, stay connected, feel your belly, right? Like stay connected. That's a big part of it. So practicing that, developing a greater sense of connection will be, I think, critical as we get older.
Such an important point. It's like the saying, chop wood, carry water, and like the idea of like when you're being present and how you do something is how you do everything. You know, when you're doing the mundane in life, like doing the dishes, the laundry, all the stuff that, you know, everyone's, I got to do the dishes. I got to go food shopping. I got to chop the vegetables. It's like you do it with an awareness of presence because I like what you're saying, you know, we could do it, how deeply we can connect to everything we're doing. It's just such a
Even if
great
it's
thing to meditate on for us.
even if it sucks, right? Like even if
But
you're
that's
doing
my
something,
point. Yeah,
you know,
exactly. Like,
but
I gotta do
but
that.
but let's
Yeah.
let's say you really don't enjoy it. Like
Yeah.
the idea isn't to try to trick yourself into enjoying it.
Right.
The idea is like, boy, this is really not very fun, man.
Yeah.
It's almost like
Yeah.
creating a witness around the human experience, right?
Okay,
Remembering
yes.
we are not
Good
just
point.
this like, you know, corporeal form. We have another aspect to us, and we can kind of become the witness and watch yourself. Oh man, I didn't realize how much I hated doing dishes. But this is not very fun.
Yeah.
And so you can create this like distance from the experience itself. And
So
that
good.
itself is a great connection to what's happening. Because otherwise what's happening is you're just getting lost in the emotion. You're getting lost in this kind of
and
like,
you're identifying with it.
that's right. That's right. And so as we disidentify with it, we actually draw a greater connection to the experience itself. Boy, this is really, it's really hot in here. I didn't realize how hot it was. Boy, it is really hot. So it's not getting lost, right? And it's not sort of contracting, but it's expanding and connecting to the entirety of the experience. And same thing when you enjoy something. Oftentimes we get into this joyful flow state and we actually forget to kind of bring our awareness and disconnect and go, wow, look at me. I'm really, really loving this. Look at this moment. You might do that sometimes, right? Like really cool experience, maybe a wedding or something like that, where you kind of just pause and you're
step
like, wow,
outside of yourself. Like,
look at this. How cool is this, right?
Yeah.
So how can we do that more and more, right? I try to do that with my 3-year-old. He provides me such a great opportunity to remember that he's not going to be 3 forever. I'm not going to have my mobility like I have now. There's things that this will never happen again, right? There's things that will maybe look like it, but this is a cool experience. This is a unique moment in time. How can I appreciate it? Knowing that there's going to be other cool moments down the line, but this is unique. I want to connect to this as much as I can without getting lost and just kind of losing my awareness in the whole thing.
Such great stuff. I mean, so you already are a wise elder and you're not old.
Thank you.
So that's just what a gift. I'm just so grateful. I'm curious, do you have a favorite quote you live by, Jason?
I'm really not good with quotes, but there
or
is
maybe
one.
just even like a motto, like something in your travels from all the wise people you've come in touch with, or little thing that kind of keeps you going, or thing you find yourself repeating to.
I don't. I live. I think the sort of commandment that really I live by, or try to live by, is alignment. So it's really understanding what alignment is, remembering that when I'm operating from alignment, reality shifts. If I'm out of alignment, what does that look like? So it's a constant process of even understanding what alignment is for me. But as I orient to this idea of alignment, that to me is the key factor that has me wandering reality, no matter where I am. If I follow my alignment, right, then I will be okay. So that's kind of what I return to. I love a ton. There's so many quotes I love. I included a number of them in the book. There's a great one by Tesla, and I'm totally forgetting even remotely what it is. But there's so many brilliant people that say a lot of great things.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's me coming back to me and my alignment. Like no matter how aligned can I be? That's going to provide me the ultimate security, safety, and protection, and the gifts that are here.
And in Native American cultures, they have a saying that when your mind, body, and feet line up in the same place, that's when your soul is expressing itself. And that's what I'm hearing you say is the alignment. It's like everything is lined up right together, like right in the place. It's like, again, just being present, like your heart's here, your mind's here, your feet are here. You're not off thinking of something else, what you're going to do. It's that's when we're at our ultimate power. So
absolutely.
That's a great answer. Jason, thank you so much. Again, thank you. This has been so valuable. I know everybody listening and watching got a lot out of it. You guys, you know what to do. If you want to find out more, you can check out Jason's project, his book, his work, his website. Jason, I'm going to toss it to you to share where that is, but I'll just remind everybody it's in the show notes. And Well, Jason, why don't you share with us what that is, where people can find you and learn more?
Yeah, the book I have is called Beyond Longevity, a proven plan to heal faster, feel better, and thrive at any age. So that can be found anywhere books are sold, of course, Amazon. And then you can find my Human Longevity Project docuseries, as well as a lot of my other work that I do at awakenedhealthacademy.com.
Yeah, and that's in the show notes. Everybody, if you appreciated the show, please share it, like it, follow the show. Make sure you check out his first episode 80 with Dr. Mario Martinez. And you can visit my favorite products and save a little money with my coupon codes, as well as help me out to help pay for the show on my website under my recommended products page. Jason, thanks so much for being on the show. We'll see you next time, everybody. Over and out from Awakening Aphrodite Central. Bye-bye. Would you like to support my mission to help empower people all over the world to be all of who they truly are? If so, please subscribe to the show, leave a review on iTunes, and share it with a friend. And if you're looking to take immediate action to align your energy and optimize your health, visit amyfournier.com. Thanks for listening to Awakening Aphrodite. Let's awaken her together in you. I'm your hostess, Amy Fournier. And I already can't wait to be with you again and for you to hear what I have planned for the next show.
Thanks for listening to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. To learn more about Amy, check out her website, amyfournier.com. That's AMYFOURNIER.com. You can also check out Amy's live and on-demand virtual fitness and yoga classes, and sign up for her newsletter to receive a free mini ebook of 3 of her top tips for making holistic health a lifestyle. Again, that's amyfournier.com, and get your ebook sent to your email immediately. Connect with Amy on the daily on Instagram at FitAmyTV, FITAMYTV, and watch many of the podcast episodes and subtopic clips on her YouTube channel, which is also FitAmyTV. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time on Awakening Aphrodite.